It is fairly flat for European stocks overall. We're down 0.2% on the FTSE 100. Be aware that US futures flat to very slightly negative this hour. Let's get a look at some of the stocks on the move this morning. Let's get to Danny Berger. Danny?
News this morning. Telia, one of the companies, the Swedish telecoms giant, trading at a March high after agreeing to sell its carrier operator. That deal comes in, gives it a little bit more than $1 billion. But part of the reason the stock is surging more than 4.5% is because it's decided with this cash injection to reinstate its dividend. Not only is it reinstating its dividend, it's getting it back to what it promised, or at least wanted, back in January before the coronavirus virus struck the company. So those shares rallying. Puma, though, to the downside. This is after Kering, the Gucci owner, decided to sell part of its stake. This is something that Kering has been doing since 2018. It's been trying to push its portfolio more up market. This time, it's selling a 5.9% stake. It's trading right now about where Kering sold it at. It still has 9.8% left, though. Finally, Premier Oil, more deal flow here, agreeing to merge with Chrysler Holdings, making one of the UK's biggest North Sea oil and gas operator. This is really positive for Premier because they've been wanting to restructure their debt for a while.
New position opened at 117.88.
Have to talk about is this takeover, or at least attempted takeover, between Veolia and Suez. Suez this morning trading at a record high after Veolia bought a 29.9% stake from Engie of Suez. Look, it's been attempting to do this for some time. Don't have the prices up quite yet, but you will see there's a big rally coming from these companies, especially Engie, because it agreed to sell its stake to Veolia because Veolia upped the offer price by 16%. So we're seeing a pretty 2.4% rally there. Suez, though, not yet trading at the 18 euros a share that Veolia has said it would try to take it over at. Certainly rallying this morning, but still there's a little bit of skepticism in the market clearly as to whether this will happen. Now, Veolia, for its part, said it would not pursue a hostile takeover, but it's unlikely that it will be not hostile because Suez itself has said that it's going to use any means at its disposal to really fight off what it calls a creeping takeover, because this really has been happening for some time. But look, Engie, which sold the stake to Suez itself, said that it wants to see a friendly merger between the companies, really echoing what we heard from Bruno Le Maire, saying that the French state wants to see a friendly deal. But again, there needs to be this really big change of heart from Suez, because despite all the offers it's been getting from Veolia, it is using, again, any means at its disposal to try to prevent that takeover. Matt, Anna?
All right, Danny, thanks very much. Danny Berger there, going through some of the big movers for some of the big stories in markets today. Up next, back to the White House. President Trump returns from the hospital and says he will be back on the campaign trail soon. He takes his mask off as soon as he gets back to the house and tells Americans not to be scared or let the coronavirus take over their lives. The next debate is scheduled for just 9 days from now, October 15th. If doctors allow it, it'll go forward, according to both sides. We'll discuss all of this and more next. This is Bloomberg.
open profit for Euro USD at 117.86.
Welcome back to Bloomberg Markets. This is the European Open. We are 30 minutes into the trading day right now, and still looking at kind of a mixed picture in terms of the indexes, with the FTSE down, the DAX and the CAC just slightly rising. A House panel in U.S. Congress is set to propose sweeping reforms to block tech giants like Amazon and Apple from selling their own products on the marketplaces they own. That's according to a critique of the recommendations by a Republican lawmaker. If they come to pass, the reforms would be the most dramatic overhaul of competition law in decades. Joining us to explain all of this is Alex Webb, tech columnist at Bloomberg Opinion. So, Alex, why can't Apple sell? Will Apple not be able to sell its products in the Apple Store?
I think at this stage we still are really looking for what the details are going to be here, but the implication is that if you essentially can't sell products on platforms where you might have competitors, and it does appear to be the case at times that Apple at least is able to give preferential treatment to some of its own offerings, for example, Apple Music versus Spotify, for instance. And then you look at Amazon with Marketplace, it might also have the incentive to do that. It seems as though that is the kind of weak spot that this panel is targeting, and it has potentially wide-reaching implications.
And we were discussing this before the program, Alex, a little bit earlier. Good morning to you, Matt and I. And he was making the comparison with supermarkets and saying, they sell their own brand product as well as the branded stuff. And I think we've talked about this before, because I think this has been a talking point for a while. Is that a relevant comparison in this case, or not?
I mean, with due apologies to Matt, that is the kind of line you hear trotted out by Amazon's PR team. It's not quite true, because it's the equivalent of, the reality is, this is more like Amazon knowing the commercial activity of every shop on the high street, right? Walmart, in this sort of point of comparison, knowing every shop on the high street, and therefore being able to look into what they're doing well and saying, we're going to do this, or come up with these competing products. Similar with Apple on the App Store, they are the only vector to sell apps into iPhones. Walmart is not the only way that if you are
well, but you don't have to have an iPhone. There are many other phones, right? And I mean, a lot of people don't use the iPhone.
Yeah,
Alex.
and
you can choose so many other competitors.
But that's not actually quite true, because you also have the other 50% of the market is controlled by Google. So if you look at the way that Apple has developed the iPhone, you're kind of tied into it. Now look, I'm not saying that this legislation as it's proposed is going to be, or this report is going to be the correct solution. I can see there might be a great deal of problems with it, but ultimately I think that we are at least starting to address these issues seriously, and that is something that I think is long overdue.
All right, well, I defer to you as the expert on this, Alex. And I recommend that people read your columns as well. You can check out Alex's work and the work of his colleagues by typing OPIN GO on the Bloomberg terminal.
Position closed on Euro at 117.88. We got £200 in profit.
First word news now. These are the top stories from the Bloomberg terminal. For that, we go to Laura Wright. Laura?
Thanks, Matt. The coronavirus can spread through the air to people who are more than 6 feet away from an infectious person. That's the latest guidance from the CDC. The agency says this method of transmission is uncommon and happened in enclosed spaces with poor ventilation. Still, it raises new challenges for safely reopening businesses and schools. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson will commit to boosting offshore wind power as part of his delayed green industrial revolution. That's as he seeks to get his stalled domestic agenda back on course. Speaking at the Conservative Party conference, he's set to say renewable energy can help drive the recovery. Spain may extend its emergency wage support beyond January. The nation's social security minister says Madrid is ready to reevaluate the situation, but that a lot will depend on a vaccine. An extension of the program could protect hundreds of thousands of at-risk jobs. Spain already has one of the region's highest unemployment rates. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg. Anna, Matt.
Laura, thanks very much. Laura Wright in London. President Donald Trump returned to the White House after 3 days of hospital treatment for COVID-19. In a video released shortly after, he urged Americans not to be afraid of the virus.
Don't let it dominate. Don't let it take over your lives. Don't let that happen. We have the greatest country in the world. We're going back to work. We're going to be out front.